I had the opportunity to stay at a bed and breakfast in New Mexico, just outside the Apache Indian Reservation. Although I can't recall the name of the place, it was a remarkable experience. Upon our arrival, we were warmly greeted by an elderly couple who owned and managed the bed and breakfast. They kindly gave us a brief tour of the property and its buildings. After settling into our room, we had dinner and then retired early for the night. The following morning, I slept through breakfast because I was quite exhausted from our travels. However, I briefly woke up at some point because I heard movement in the room. As I glanced around, I noticed a figure walking near the couch, which was situated across the room. I thought it was my mother, so I paid it no mind and went back to sleep. Around 30 minutes later, I woke up again to the sight of my actual mother and sister coming up the stairs. Confused, I asked them where they had been. They said they already had breakfast and took a walk around the property. They'd been gone for about an hour and a half and had not returned to the room. This revelation left me feeling uneasy, so I shared what had happened with them. Without hesitation, we hurried downstairs and approached the living quarters of the owners. We explained the situation to them, detailing what I witnessed. To our surprise, they calmly informed us that what I had likely seen was the ghost of a nurse who had resided on the property in the early 1900s. According to the owners, she would frequently visit the guests at the bed and breakfast, particularly approaching any male guests. Almost every person who stayed there had mentioned this peculiar phenomenon. I was utterly amazed by their explanation and wished I had been more aware to grab my camera and capture the moment. For a couple of years, my mother, sister, and I lived in an ancient house that had 3 incidents which defied simple explanations. The first incident happened when I returned home from school one day. Being alone, I entered the bathroom and, while seated on the toilet, the partially open bathroom door suddenly slammed shut. I considered the possibility of it being a result of air pressure since the place was drafty. However, what baffles me is how the door locked itself. It had an old-fashioned deadbolt style lock that required a specific antique key with a long stem. We never had the key. Plus, I even slammed the door countless times without it ever locking. After several hours trapped in the bathroom, a neighbor came over to try to pick the lock. When his attempts failed, he resorted to breaking down the door. He kicked it once, and just as he was preparing for another strike, there was an audible click, and the door swung open. The second incident involves a figure that multiple people, including my mother, sister, a babysitter, the homeowners, and myself, witnessed. It appeared to be a tall woman in a full-length dress with straight, long blonde hair. My mother spotted it first, once in her bedroom and another time in the living room during broad daylight. She kept quiet about it since the rent was cheap. The babysitter, who was also a family friend, reported seeing a woman sitting on the porch swing through the living room window, but when she stepped outside, there was no one there. On another occasion, she saw a similar figure in the yard, but given that we had neighbors, it raised some doubts. As for me, I encountered this figure when I woke up to find someone standing beside my bed. Surprisingly, there was no creepiness or fear, just a lady standing there. However, there was a distinct chill in the air. She turned and left, and assuming it was my mom's friend Sue, I got up and went into the hallway only to find no one there. When I woke my mother and mentioned it, she informed me that Sue wasn't staying with us that night. Since it happened at 5 a.m., I stayed awake afterward, making me doubt it was merely a dream. It wasn't until a year after we moved out that my mother broached the subject of a possible ghost. As she described what she had seen, it matched my own experience. We then spoke to others who had stayed with us, including the babysitter, and their descriptions aligned with ours, without any prompting from my mother. Even the homeowners, who were friends of my parents and from whom we were renting the place, admitted to considering it haunted when we asked them a couple of years later. They refrained from mentioning it at the time, thinking they were just imagining things. They described the ghostly figure as a tall blonde woman. The third and final incident had to do with the basement. The house had an overall eerie atmosphere that couldn't be easily dismissed as poor architecture or budget decor. People felt an unexplained sense of dread when inside. The temperature was always cold, regardless of the time of year. During the summer, we rarely needed air conditioning, but in the winter, even with the furnace running at full blast, we had to light a fire in the living room to keep warm. Although the house was spacious, drafty, and old, it had a new furnace, which should have made a noticeable difference. It did not. No one dared to venture into the basement for any reason. I myself never made it past halfway down the stairs. Even my dad found excuses to avoid going down there to check on the woefully inadequate furnace. Mom had the washer and dryer set up in the kitchen to avoid going down there. I moved into this large old house that my friend was trying to sell. Since it was empty and I needed a temporary place to stay, I decided to live there for a while. The house was devoid of furniture and amenities like the internet or a TV, so I relied on my instruments for entertainment. There was always a lingering belief that the place might be haunted. We heard footsteps, witnessed objects moving on their own, and my friend even claimed to have seen a lady walking down the hallway one night. But it was when I started living there alone that the creepiness truly intensified. I would frequently hear someone walking around and shifting things in the kitchen. As a way of asserting my dominance over the situation, I would confidently play my banjo in the living room while observing outside through the window. I would pause whenever the movement in the kitchen ceased, only to resume playing once it started up again. This cat and mouse game would go on for hours, leaving me alternately unsettled and determined. On one particular night, a friend joined me at the house. While we were sitting in the backyard discussing the possibility of the place being haunted, we suddenly heard a scream emanating from inside. It only reinforced our suspicions, especially considering that the previous owner had died there. Later, as I prepared to go to bed, I walked down the hallway and caught a glimpse of a blinding flash of light behind me and in the mirror at the end of the hallway. It sent chills down my spine. And of course, I still heard the eerie footsteps that night. Shortly after that unsettling experience, my friend, who was the homeowner, came over. Fearing the strange occurrences, we decided to sleep in the same bed. Throughout the night, we heard disturbing noises. When we woke up the next morning, we discovered that one of my socks, which I had left in the living room inside my suitcase, was on the bathroom floor and stained with blood. We had no idea where the blood came from. I immediately called my friend to come and investigate. When he entered the bathroom, all the towels suddenly fell off the towel rack. One night, a friend and I were hanging out at his house, playing video games, when we decided to go out for some late night food since it was already past midnight. The only option available was the 24-hour McDonald's. After getting our food, we thought it would be fun to cruise around the back roads. Although we were not familiar with the area since we were driving on another tribe's land, my friend had a general sense of where we were going. The road we were on led us to the middle of nowhere. We eventually stopped on top of a big mesa where the road went down in a snake-like pattern. Despite it being nighttime, we could still see a long way off in the distance from our vantage point. We saw house lights where the road led and a faint glow on the horizon. After getting out of the car, I walked closer to the edge of the overlook point and started howling and screaming just to hear my echo. After a few minutes, I walked to the very edge and looked down. I saw a light from a window just below me, close enough to where I could have thrown a stone and hit it. The light appeared to be from a candle with the flickering, but it wasn't dim like a candle would be. The windowsill portion was made of stone and looked like an adobe house. However, since I was higher up and at an angle, I couldn't see inside the window or what the house looked like in general. At this point, I turned to my friend and said something like, "Dude, there's a house right there." I pointed to it. My friend looked over and saw the light from the window too. He laughed and agreed. We both got in his car and left. Nothing spooky or creepy crossed my mind that night. A few weeks later, my friend and I went cruising around again, but this time during the day. We visited the same area and pulled over to look at the view. I went back to the edge of the mesa and looked over, but to my surprise, there was nothing there. Not only was there no sign of the house, but a house couldn't have been built there in the first place. It was way too steep and rocky. Just boulders, sand, and weeds. I told my friend and he looked over the edge too. That's when we both wondered what the hell did we see that night. Years later, I met a coworker who lived and grew up on the reservation where that mesa overlook was. We began trading scary stories when I told him about seeing the adobe house at night that wasn't there in the daytime. He laughed and said something like, "Dude, you saw the witch house." Witch house? I asked him to explain. He said that the area I was in was known for being a spot that people stay away from at night. Apparently, witches hang out there from time to time. There is a small adobe house on that cliffside, but it's tiny. It's something the average person would have to crawl to get into. He didn't know much more than that, but said he knew plenty of stories of people seeing it lit up at night. I've experienced two identical events that I've never been able to explain. Many years ago, when I was a teenager, I was casually walking through my home's basement and passed my little sister Sarah, who was probably 12 years old at the time. As I rounded a corner towards the stairs, I saw Sarah running down the stairs from the main floor. I stopped her immediately and asked what happened because I had just seen her in another room not 10 seconds ago. She was confused. I decided not to investigate any further because the experience had spooked me. About a year later, my family and I were on a camping trip in western Wyoming. I was walking with my older sister Lisa past a crafting lodge and saw Sarah run into it. We walked for about half a mile down the only trail that crossed the campsite to reach the bathrooms. As we reached the bathrooms, we saw Sarah run out of them. My older sister stopped me and was freaked out, because Sarah had just been in the crafting lodge half a mile away. It would have been impossible for her to cross the campsite without us seeing her. I was really freaked out this time because someone else had witnessed it. I still don't know if these events mean anything. My sister and I share a bedroom and leave the door cracked open about a foot at night for our cats to come and go as they please. Last night, and about a week ago, around 1 a.m., we both noticed a flashing light coming from the crack in our door. It was like an LED light with a bluish-white color, not too bright, but definitely noticeable. When it happened a week ago, the flash of light lasted about maybe a second, occurring roughly 45 seconds apart, 3 or 4 times. I got out of bed and checked the hallway, but didn't find anything, except my dog standing at the end of the hallway looking down, as if seeing something. Last night, my sister woke me up, saying she had seen the light 20 minutes ago and hadn't seen it since. But as soon as she told me, it blinked again, and I saw it. This time, it blinked more times in a row than before, quite a few times within about 30 seconds, with the blinks being more sporadic. They stopped for a while and then started again, pausing and then continuing. We also heard some scuffling in the hallway, but it wasn't from our pets. Later, my mom said my dog got up again and was looking into the hallway. We searched for the source of the blinking light but found nothing. When we asked the light to stop, it blinked faster. This lasted for a few seconds and then returned to normal. At one point, both my sister and I started to tear up uncontrollably when we saw it blink again after a minute or two. I'm sure this is paranormal because I searched for quite a while to find something that would blink and flash like that in the hallway, trying to rationalize what was happening, but I found nothing. More than 2 years ago, something happened at my former boyfriend's apartment. The very first night I spent with him, we experienced something strange, which we kind of brushed off. While he went into the bathroom to shower, I sat on the couch in the living room watching TV. Sometime between hearing the shower turn off and my boyfriend singing to himself, I began to hear what sounded like sheetrock detaching from the ceiling in the hallway. The sound was so clear and unmistakable that I heard it completely detach, fall on the floor with a loud crash, and shatter. It scared me to death. I immediately jumped up and ran to the hallway. There was nothing there. My boyfriend, who ran out of the bathroom naked, also heard the sound. We both searched the area and found nothing broken, and the ceiling? It was intact. We thought it was perhaps outside noise. Over 2 years later, last night, at my home with my husband, it happened again. My husband brought out a foam mattress into the living room and placed it near the fireplace to have a romantic time. After spending time being intimate, we were both laying down, talking, kissing, getting ready to fall asleep, when we both heard what sounded like a sheetrock panel detaching from the ceiling until it fell off, crashed on the floor and shattered just inches away from our heads. The sound was so loud that it scared us both. My husband screamed and I jumped up and ran to turn on the light. Once again, there was nothing there. We both instantly remembered the time at my former boyfriend's apartment when we heard the exact same thing. Now I'm wondering what in the world is happening. We're still trying to figure out the connection between the two incidents. 2 times, the exact same sound, at 2 different locations, 2 years apart. My grandma and her family used to live in a small area in Tennessee. Her parents, siblings, and she moved into an old farmhouse in the 50s. I asked her how old she thought the house was, but she said she didn't know. All she knew was that it was definitely old. In the night, they would hear a door open and shut in the house, all night long. And then there was the sound of a cat screeching. Finally, her daddy had enough and removed the hinges off the door and replaced them with leather hinges to see if that would stop the door from opening and shutting. It didn't. Open, shut, cat screech, over and over. Under the house was enough room for her and her siblings to play. The house was set up high on stones, so there was no skirting under the home. It was just open. Someone had tried to build a cellar but never finished it. Every time they went down there, they would find balls of long hair. The hair looked grayish, like a woman's hair. And underneath the balls of hair were coins. So my grandma and her siblings would just toss the hair and grab the coins. There was no explanation for why the coins were there, and why they were underneath hair. One day, my grandma's mama got sick, so great-great-grandma came over to help with the kids. She only stayed one night. She got ready to leave before the sun came up. Grandma said her mama asked her why she was leaving, to which she replied, "I seen a man and his wife pass through the dresser and into the wall. The wife was missing her head. I ain't staying in this house." She left and never came back to the house. Across from the house where they lived was an open field. In the field was a large 3-story home, a rancher-type house. In its heyday, it must have been beautiful, but now it looked weathered. The paint peeled. It just looked like it'd seen better days. Every night on the top floor, in one of the windows, everyone saw a candlelight flickering. Grandma's dad was curious, and one day he walked over to the old house to see where the light could be coming from. Was anyone living there? All the kids went along. Great-grandpa walked inside. Man, the house on the inside looked worse. There was no way someone could go upstairs. Why? Because the stairs had rotted away. Meanwhile, Grandma's half-sister went to the cellar door and opened it. Down in the cellar was an old, tacky-looking man. He looked up and said to her,
"Come on in."
Her sister slammed the door and ran. There were no steps that led into the cellar. I don't think they ever went back to that old house again. They stayed in their house from when my grandma was 8 till she was 11. And then they moved, never looking back. We moved in this home around 2000. I was 3 or 4. Honestly, after we moved in, it felt like our lives had gone downhill. I honestly believe there was something evil in that house. My mom says the first night she slept in the house, she dreamed of a thick fog and a black cat. She woke up and remembers telling Dad that they messed up buying the house. It gave her a feeling of dread. My grandma and my mom were sitting in the living room, and I was sitting on the floor playing. We all heard a man groan behind the door. There was no one there. In one of the rooms that we used as a junk room, there were outlines of where posters had been on the walls. So the space was white where the poster had been, but the rest of the walls had a yellow tinge. I guess somebody there smoked. Where our back door was, back where our washer and dryer would be in our utility room, there were tiny scratches on the bottom of the door. Like cat scratches. My parents' bedroom door had the same thing at the bottom. When I was around 6, I thought I saw something in the back room, but I saw it out of the corner of my eye. It was something white, like a dress with a long train. It went from one side of the room to the other. It might have been my imagination, but I don't know. I would have dreams where I would try and run out of one of the rooms, but I couldn't. I couldn't scream. My legs went numb. It was like I couldn't run away. Like something dragged me back. My mom woke up one morning and seen what she thought was my dad at the end of the bed. It was a work day. She thought he came back home early. Maybe he was sick. The man had red hair, like my dad, and wore a blue workman's uniform. When she cleared her eyes, the man was gone. My grandma and grandpa stayed with us in the house. My grandpa was on hospice, so my mom helped give him medication. My grandma had a dream where she saw the man with red hair in the bathroom. He looked at the mirror over the sink. My grandpa was scared for the lights to be turned off. During this time, my parents would argue, like all the time. Anyone who stayed in the house, it was like the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was having problems of my own. I was depressed almost all the time. I always felt like I was being watched. Like there was always something just watching me. I'd look behind my shoulder and of course there would be nothing. My grandma felt one time something got into bed with her. The way she described it, it was like a big dog. She'd be half asleep and kick it out of bed, and it would get right back into bed with her. Kick it out, get back in, till finally it stopped. I remember my mom and I watching this movie in my parents' bedroom when all of a sudden we heard this loud bang. It was like someone took a concrete block and threw it as hard as they could against the floor in the bathroom or closet. We jumped and looked around. Nothing. Nothing fell. But it was so loud. It definitely sounded like it came from the closet. That closet. It was huge. It was a deep walk-in closet. My grandma was up one morning taking care of Grandpa when she said she started hearing sounds of wire hangers violently hitting the sides of the closet wall. She knocked on my parents' door. She thought my mom had gotten into a fight with my dad and was packing his stuff or hers and was jerking clothes off the hangers, letting them hit the closet walls. My grandma found out that my parents were still sound asleep. My mom sat on the couch one day and felt something furry rub up against her leg, like a cat. But there wasn't a cat there. This happened twice. The second time she felt it pull on her shirt. Grandma and Mom said they were sitting on the couch and they heard a picking sound, like a cat sharpening its nails on the treadmill they had. There were marks on the treadmill from cat's claws, but no cat. We didn't have a cat. Halloween. My mom put out a step mat we had for years. This was one of those things where you stepped on it and a man's voice would say, "Happy Halloween, ha 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 ha." It was a real cute step mat. purple, orange pumpkin. It went off by itself, all the time, like someone kept stepping on it. She ripped out the voice box and step sensor mechanism. I'm sure other things happened, but I just can't remember. I'm not sure I want to. When I was 9 years old, I went to a sleepaway camp for the summer. The camp itself was massive and very isolated. The kids were separated into age groups and gender. Each group slept in a different camp area, inside wood cabins. My group's cabin was right off the main road of the camp, allowing easy access for cars to come into our area. My story happened one night when I woke up and needed to pee. My cabin did not have a bathroom, so I had to walk down this road to the bathhouse, which was right next to the entrance where cars could come in. When I left the cabin, I saw there was a white pickup truck in front of the bathhouse with its headlights on. I found it strange, but it got stranger when I got closer to the truck. Nobody was inside. I figured that the driver would be inside the bathhouse, but when I got inside there, nobody. I was starting to get spooked, so I did my thing as fast as I could. When I left the bathhouse, the truck was gone. There was no sign it was even there. I was shocked. The truck was close enough to the bathhouse, I would have heard it. I ran back up the hill to my cabin and just sat in bed for the rest of the night. I couldn't sleep. When the sun came up, I went back outside to check the area where the truck had been. There weren't even track marks. Impossible. The ground was muddy. To this day, I still don't know what happened. Was the truck really there or not? I used to hang out at this ATV park in western Iowa. The park was mostly thick wooded trails. My friends and I had permission to camp there next to a river, under the condition that we always left with more trash than we came with. Our campsite was about 1 mile from the parking lot. The parking lot was gated off with a 6-foot fence and motorized steel gate blocking the entrance. There's no way in the park if you're outside, and there's no way out if you're inside once that gate is locked. I mean, you could climb the fence, but what would be the point? So this night, my friends and I decided to hike back to our cars to grab some supplies. We came in view of the lot, which is about 300 yards, and we could see taillights in the parking lot. I texted the park ranger, asked him if he was there or if he knew somebody was there. He didn't reply. I mean, it was so late, he was probably asleep. We then thought maybe it's the police. As we got closer, the vehicle looked like an old 1970s style 4-door car. Now we're really confused. It's not a cop car, it's not the park ranger. The gate is locked, we can see it locked from this distance. How did this car get inside? The car sped off and drove clean through the closed steel gate. It didn't make a noise. It simply disappeared. My heart pounded out of my chest. We always felt that the park was haunted. We'd always see shadow figures off in the distance, but as we approached them, they would disappear. But this phantom car? We tried to debunk it, but we could never come up with a logical explanation. One night I was at a party with a friend. My friend and I decided to leave the party in my car. We got into the car and I turned the car on. I looked both ways and then backed out of the spot. But as soon as I started to turn, a pickup truck going about 80 or 90 miles an hour slams into the passenger side of my car. Everything became slow motion at this point. The window shattered. My friend's head flies at me and hits me in the face, knocks me out. When I came to, I felt my whole body tingling. My head was foggy. My vision was blurry. My friend was unconscious with his head slumped over. I started screaming his name and he woke up slowly. The first thing he mumbled was, "Are you okay?" I replied I was, and then I asked what just happened. He said we got into an accident. I stumbled out of the car to check the damage, but my car was still in the parking space. Not only is it in the parking space, but it's untouched. At this point, my mind starts going crazy. I get back into the car and my friend is still foggy. I go to take the keys out of the ignition, but they were not even in there. I told my friend we were not in a car accident. He couldn't understand what I was talking about. When he got out, he was in complete shock. He recalled the exact experience I had, but it never happened. I went on living my life, but my friend went crazy. He started seeing demons inside people and would not leave his house, ever. Just thought I'd share something that happened to me a decade ago, but still creeps me out to this day. Being 9 at the time, I was living in Southeast Asia with my family. My mom had to head off to work early, so I tagged along. It was still pretty dark outside, but it was already shaping up to be a humid day. Since the place where she worked at was a while away, we had to get up pretty early. Anyways, we were walking toward the taxi stop situated by the main road. I felt that it was just too eerily quiet. There were no cars or trucks on the road. All you could hear were the frogs croaking away. As we crossed the road and waited by the taxi stop, I noticed that there was this woman dressed in a white flowy gown opposite us, with her head hanging low, almost as if she was staring at the ground. She wasn't directly opposite of us, but a couple meters away from the taxi stop on her end. Her hair was disheveled and black. I was afraid, so I just covered my face with my hands and then looked back at the lady. It seemed like she moved even closer to the taxi stop. Her head was still tilted down. I started to feel more creeped out, so I turned to my mom and asked her if she noticed anything off with the woman. My mom just responded with, "What woman?" "Well, whatever or whoever you saw, don't look at them." I found this very unsettling. I just waited impatiently, trying hard not to look while we waited for the taxi. At this moment, I don't know why, but I thought that glancing towards the general direction of the lady was okay to do, since she probably wouldn't have noticed. But she did. The woman was now perfectly opposite us, standing by the taxi stop. She looked up and moved her hand, like she was waving. To me. Her hair covered her face, so it was difficult to see her expression. The taxi soon arrived, and as Mom and I got inside and settled ourselves, I looked out the window, and the lady wasn't there anymore. There was just a lonely-looking taxi stop. I lived this story with my grandmother and her dog. Most of my father's family lives in the north of the country, to be more exact, in Santiago del Estero. The thing is that they have many animals: horses, pigs, cows, goats, every farm animal you can think of. One summer night, with only the moonlight to help us, my grandmother asked me to help her look for a goat that had escaped. It was a little baby goat, completely black. Now this seemed strange to me because I knew most of the goats, and that one was not familiar to me. I didn't care though. I just wanted to finish and go to sleep. We soon spotted the little goat. The strange thing is that every time we got closer to it, the goat was farther and farther away. Suddenly, we began to hear music. It came from those smaller mountains. My grandmother stopped and said, "Let's go back, Juan. That goat is not ours. It's the devil who wants to take us." The legends of this area speak about the Salamancas. La Salamanca is a legendary place that appears in numerous Latin American legends. This place is where witches and demons celebrate their covens. Legend says that in order to enter, you must undress and spit on a religious figure. Then you must live your worst fears. And then maybe the devil will grant you a wish. I am from Argentina, and I went to visit my family that lives in the north of the country. I had to sleep in a room alone, in a separate guest room from the house, without air conditioning, with the windows open, and a fan that blew to the core of my soul. That was enough for the hellish nights in January. One night, I was sleeping like a baby when I woke up to the smell of bad tobacco. The smell was suffocating. Even with the fan running full blast, it was unbearable. I lay there without moving, waiting for something to happen. I soon realized that someone was watching me from the window. It's one of those sensations that you can't confirm, but you know it's happening. Someone was watching me from the window. Anguish and fear entered me. I did not understand what it was. I knew that it was not a person wanting to enter to steal. It didn't feel that way. It was someone, something, that was just looking at me from the darkness of the courtyard. Time passed. They did not leave. Neither did the foul smell, nor the sensation of being watched. Anguish and fear turned to terror. Without moving a muscle, I began to pray. My family is very religious, so it came quite naturally for me to pray. I'm an atheist, but fear overcame me. After a while, the smell completely disappeared. The sensation of someone looking at me disappeared also. I got up and turned on the patio lights. I didn't see anyone or anything. The next day, I went out to take a good look at the patio. At my window, in the ground, odd footprints. And lying in the yard, a wooden pipe. When I was about 8 or 9, my parents had put in with a piano teacher. No, we were not rich. Her name was Miss Vicky. I don't know how long I was training with her, but at one point I was to perform a recital which took place at a local church. This all occurred in a very small town in Texas. It was a beautiful Mayberry type town. Everyone was friendly and knew you, that sort of thing. This recital took place at a church. This place was packed full of people, all wanting to see their children perform. Some children sang, played instruments, or both. I was on the side of the stage, in a little room with many other kids. All of us were dressed like we were in a church service. I was nervous. I didn't know anybody. Standing in line, I would watch the other kids perform and bow. The line grew shorter. It got closer to my turn. I was about 4 kids away when I began wondering what we were supposed to do after we performed. Like, where do we go? I started watching what the other kids did. I watched several of the kids bow to the audience and walk to the other side of the stage to enter a door in the back. I know for a fact I saw at least 3 people do that. My turn comes. With butterflies in my stomach, I walked on stage, sat in front of the piano, and performed the most basic ode to joy you ever heard. When I was done, I faced the audience as they applauded. I then walked to the other side of the stage, where I saw the other kids go, and I opened the door and saw something I did not expect. Over the years, I wonder if I stepped through to another dimension, or saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Regardless of the reason, what I saw was not normal. Standing in this small room, no larger than an average bedroom, with no other way out, stood an elephant. Or at least, I think it was an elephant. It was covered in colorful streamers. It was huge, and there was no way it could have gotten in there, or out, without a wall to have been broken down. That's not all I saw, though. There were 2 kids. One on the right, standing on the floor, and one to the left of the elephant. That one was up higher, like he was standing on a ladder. I can't quite describe what the kids were wearing, but it was odd. The closest thing I can come up with is that they looked like the elves in Disney's The Santa Claus. But even that's not right. Both of these kids looked at me bewildered. They didn't seem angry or upset, but were just as shocked to see me as I was them. That was when I realized that none of the kids I saw go into this room were there. I closed the door and was faced with the laughing audience of my unintentional comedy. Afterwards, I told my parents what I saw, but they seemed to brush it off as a wild imagination. Years later, when I was in my mid-20s, when DVD was the thing but we had all of our home videos on VHS, my mother found the recital video. We watched it. I kept looking at the door. Even after all these years later, I knew what was behind it, and how no one believed me. When I saw myself perform, I cringed at my hair and clothes. I watched myself go to that door, open it, and almost immediately close it. I turned around and my face showed confusion and shock. It seemed I looked into that room a lot longer than a couple of seconds, but maybe time stood still or something. I don't know. I could hear my parents laughing behind the camera. The weirdest thing about that video, though, I saw none of the kids walk into the room like I had. I was in shock. There was no other reason for me to go through that door. None. It started as a usual weekend. I was at a friend's home with other friends, drinking, chatting, playing games. When it's summer, sometimes we decide to go outside for a walk. It was around 11:30 at night. Cloudy, but you could still easily see where you were going. We live in a countryside place, but not too much away from the nearest city. It's the typical Tuscany landscape. Anyway, we take the usual dirt road that's in front of the house. As we walk down this road, a friend, let's call him M, goes a bit further than us with another friend. This other friend comes back to us saying that he lost him in a matter of seconds. How? He was just walking with M. Where did M go? From this point, things got creepy. We started searching with torches. Maybe he fell down the side of the road. But we didn't find anything. We arrived at the end of the road and still nothing. M vanished. The road is around 200 meters straight with a dead end. How could someone disappear if that person's right in front of you? Okay, well, maybe he circled back around. Maybe he went home. Half of our group backtracked to the house to check. Me and two other friends remained at the dead end. We soon got text messages that M was not home. We decided to go back home. Halfway down the road, M reappeared from the road, running towards us. First, we thought he was pulling a joke on us. But no. He then explained to us what happened. As we all saw, M was just walking by himself a bit further than us. When he reached the dead end, he realized that we were not there behind him anymore. No torchlights, no voices, nothing. From his point of view, we were the ones who vanished. He backtracked home, but there was no one there. So then, he went back to the dead end. 3 times he did this. Back home, back to the dead end, back home, back to the dead end, and nothing. We live in this place. We would know exactly where we were with our eyes closed. There are no similar roads nearby, and it's literally impossible to miss each other on a straight road. How did any of this happen? We thought about it all night, searching for some kind of explanation, but how can you explain it? That night still haunts me. I was out in the country at some party some acquaintances were having. I was with my friends. We were only there for a couple of hours. The party was really out in the country, probably about 30 minutes to an hour away from any small town. The party took place at a barn, and while we were there, my friend and I weren't under the influence of any kind of drugs or alcohol. We were completely sober. The group I was with decided to leave the party since it was late. One of our friends was already really drunk, so we thought it best if we went home. As we walked out of the barn, there was a row of cars parked belonging to the partygoers that was in front of this long stretch of flat plains. The high row of fields was about 6 feet tall to the right of the flat ground. We were about to leave the party when the girl we were with, who was really drunk, had to grab some clothes and belongings from another friend's car. My sober friend and I stood there waiting for her to get her stuff, which was taking a while since she was so drunk. As another friend struggled to help her, my friend and I continued to stand there when all of a sudden, I saw this orb of energy appear practically out of thin air in the middle of this flat plain field in front of the cars. The orb was orange, and the energy looked like some type of plasma just floating in midair. The orb suddenly morphed into a human-like silhouette, about 6 feet tall with a head. It was also orange, and the energy was flowing inside the silhouette like it was circulating and moving around. I looked away from it in shock. A second later, my friend asked, "You're seeing this, right?" I said yes, and we looked back at it. At this point, the mysterious energy started to flow to the right, towards the taller row of corn. The ghost-like entity took about 30 seconds to reach the taller field, and as soon as it reached that part, it condensed into itself into a small ball and resumed moving into the tall grass out of sight. My friend and I were at a loss of words. We just kept repeating what we just saw. Our intoxicated friends were still rummaging through their friend's car for the belongings. There were about 15 people outside when this happened, all drunk, not paying attention to what just happened. Moments later, a kid approached me who I knew but never talked to in my life. He struck up small talk with me, but the conversation ended pretty quickly. Nothing too important. This may be related to what we just saw, but about 3 months later, the kid who approached me died of an accidental gunshot wound. I thought this wasn't only tragic, but oddly coincidental. After the kid walked away, our 2 other friends finally got their stuff and were ready to leave. As we got into our car, one of my friends opened her door to puke more. We were stuck there for a few more minutes. My sober friend was in the driver's seat and I was in the passenger seat. We were still stunned by what we witnessed. Out of nowhere, there were these huge bright headlights turned on about a foot from our car. They illuminated what looked like to be a giant monster truck-sized pickup truck directly facing our car. It was elevated high off the ground due to its large size. We looked up the driver's side of the pickup, puzzled. Puzzled because we didn't see anybody driving the truck. Meanwhile, our 2 drunk friends were outside of the car puking, not looking at this unoccupied vehicle. My friend and I stared onward at the truck as it started reversing straight back into the plain field. It continued backing up until it drove out of sight. After the truck disappeared, my friend and I looked at each other again and just couldn't believe it. We just kept asking, "What was that?" for a minute until our 2 friends got back in the car. We asked them if they saw any of what we just saw, and they said no. They said we were just seeing things. To this day, my friend and I cannot explain what happened that night. Nobody at the party reported seeing anything strange. Was the orb turned humanoid figure some type of ghost or interdimensional being? Was the giant truck appearing out of thin air some type of ghost vehicle? Or was the whole ordeal some kind of shared hallucination my friend and I both experienced while completely sober? Could it be that the other partygoers were having fun at our expense when it was some type of holographic projection they displayed? I'm not sure if it could be that. Also, the kid who passed away 3 months later coming to talk to me, immediately after seeing the field ghost, seemed almost too coincidental. So this happened maybe 2 years ago. I was working as the night manager of a local grocery store. It had been one crazy day of business. It was probably around 10 p.m. and the store was finally slowing down, so I finally had a chance to go to the restroom. Let me give you the layout of the store. When you come into the store, you come into the front entrance and then turn to the left and walk into the store. The produce department is the first one you see, and if you go to the right, you'll go down a hallway to the break room and the restrooms. So I walked into the far stall in the restroom and do my business. I then heard a voice of a child say, "Hello?" I wasn't really paying attention, so I thought he was talking to someone else. Then he said hello one more time. This time, I figured he was talking to me. So I left the stall. The boy was dressed up really nice. He was maybe 5 to 7 years old. Had on blue jeans, a dress shirt, and a tie and a blue vest. Hair was well groomed. He said hello again. I said hello. It was really odd. I didn't hear the door open or shut. The door to the men's room shut hard and always slammed shut. The boy then asked me how to turn the water on in the sink, and I showed him that all you had to do was put your hands under the nozzle and it turned on automatically. I asked him if he had a parent waiting, and he said his mom was. I said, "Okay, be safe," and I put a stepping stool up for him so he could use the sink. I went back to work. I then literally passed one of my workers outside the restroom. He said he would be out shortly. I went back to work, didn't think much of anything. A few minutes later, he joined me. I asked him if he saw the little boy washing his hands, and he said, "What little boy?" I thought he was joking, so I told him about the little boy. He said there was no one in the restroom. So I went looking for the kid. I went back to the restroom, but figured he wouldn't be there. I went through the entire store looking for him. I had 2 people working in the front of the produce department just outside of the hallway. I asked them if they saw the boy, and they both said no. The boy would have had to walk right by them. I walked the entire store looking for him and his mom. Saw no one. I asked everyone who was working, and no one saw them. I then went to loss prevention and had the guy go over the footage in the store. Saw me go into the restroom, but saw no little boy or mother. Saw me come out, and then my worker come out. We looked at all the footage on all the cameras, and the little boy and his mom were never seen. My mother and I were at a thrift store a couple months ago. We found a really cute stuffed rabbit that I wanted. It was really soft, and I'd bought a stuffed animal from that brand before. My mom got it for me. Immediately, I got a kind of weird vibe from it for many reasons. Not bad, just weird. I noted how it was in almost brand new condition, but it had clearly been owned before. The whiskers were kind of clumped together. I couldn't fathom why someone would donate it. I still sleep with stuffed animals because it's comfortable. I decided to sleep with it that night because, again, it was very soft. Now, it's important to note that I have relatively normal sleeping patterns. I'm honestly a heavy sleeper a lot of the time, and it takes a lot to wake me up in the middle of the night. That being said, I woke up at least a dozen times, and every single time without fail, the stuffed animal that should have been caged in my arms was sitting up in bed with me, staring at me. I immediately told myself it was nothing. I was just tired. It was still creepy. Due to paranoia because of my OCD, I decided to move the animal from my bedroom to the living room for when I fall asleep watching TV on the couch. At some point in the afternoon yesterday, I took a nap on the couch with the stuffed animal and then got up later and went about my life. I was in and out of my bedroom and the living room, and the rabbit had not moved once. I reached for my main stuffed animal so I could take a nap in my bed. Then I noticed the rabbit. I can guarantee with 100% certainty I never moved the animal from the couch. I hadn't even touched it since my nap earlier. I haven't been able to sleep since, even if I had my mom move it back to the living room. It's 7 a.m. and I'm going to try to take a nap now. but I don't think I can ever sleep again. I grew up in this big old house. The back part was built back in 1870. That's where my bedroom was when I was a kid. Now, I never really believed in ghosts or anything like that, but when I was about 10, that all changed. My parents were off and out. We'd have a babysitter over to keep an eye on me. But this one night, I was alone. The house was huge, like 7,500 square feet. So you can imagine how eerie it could get when you're all by yourself. Nothing really happened all evening until I hit the sack. And then, while I'm lying there, I get woken up by the sound of the TV blaring from the front of the house. My room was all the way in the back, and that TV was on full blast, like someone was trying to wake me up on purpose. I dashed downstairs to turn it off. Maybe I accidentally set a timer or something. However, as I'm heading back to my room, bam, it's on again, full volume. That's when the fear started to creep in. I switched it off again, but this time I bolted back to my room. I spent the rest of the night hiding under my blankets, trying to shake off the creepiness. Eventually, I dozed off, but not for long. I'm jolted awake at exactly 3:15 a.m. by this strange sensation. It's like a mix of warmth and coldness, and I swear, it feels like someone staring right through me. I glanced at my clock, and that's when I realized the significance of the time. But before I could wrap my head around it, I saw her, standing right across from me in the room. A girl. She's not doing anything harmful, but man, she's spooky. Yet, strangely comforting, like she's there for me, to reassure me that everything's okay. Years later, my dad uncovers this old chest hidden behind a wall in the original part of the house during renovations. Inside, there are photos of the house and some family members, but there's this one photo of 3 family members who lived in our house back in 1870. And guess what? I nearly passed out when I spotted the girl from my room in the picture. She passed away when she was 10, same age as me back then. Ever since that day, I've been a believer. She was like my guardian angel, watching over me. Crazy, huh? I was sitting on the couch in the living room at around 11:30 p.m. I had just gotten home from work and was absolutely drained, so I was sitting there kind of staring off into space. I started hearing what sounded like a person, literally and aggressively, going through my belongings in my room. I looked over into my room and nothing was there. I froze and just said to myself, "Don't look over there, don't look over there, don't look over there." The noise continued. Then a few moments later, out of nowhere, I hear something stomping at me at full speed from my room across the kitchen, stopping right in front of me. It was so loud, I had literally shielded myself instinctively because I thought something was going to attack me. I got goosebumps and my stomach dropped. That wasn't the only experience I've had in this house. My front door was always left wide open in the morning, despite me dead bolting it before I went to bed. I've been in my room with the door closed and hear multiple people having a loud conversation outside. The door was closed, so it was inaudible. I couldn't make out what they were saying. Other times, I've heard people coming up my stairs, dragging their bodies against the wall as they walked up. I have no idea what's going on. When I was in junior high school, I was a member of a gang. Nothing like what you see in movies. It was just a bunch of dumb white kids sneaking around late at night. One night, we were wandering around random neighborhoods. It was probably between midnight and 1 a.m. We came across a large party full of high school teenagers. They were drinking, yelling, and playing loud music. One of the members of our gang began mouthing off, shouting obscenities at them, and suddenly, they were chasing us down the street. Most of my friends jumped fences or scattered into neighboring yards, but me and another member ran down the middle of the street. It was fairly dark, but there were streetlights and a lot of ambient light. The largest group of partiers were chasing us. They were going to get us, I knew it. So something inside me told me to stop and stand still. I knew I couldn't outrun them, so they were going to get us. So I stopped. The entire group ran right past me, several of them within a foot of me. They tackled the person I was running with. They roughed him up quite a bit and asked him his name. I heard everything that was said, and I watched everything they did. I waited for them to turn on me next. But they never did. Instead, they finished with him and they walked back up the street, right past me. Not one of them looked at me, even though I was literally standing in the middle of the street, no less than a few inches from them. I waited until they passed, and then I walked over to my friend to help him off the ground. He was shocked to see me. He asked me where I went. I told him I was standing there the whole time. He insisted I wasn't. He said he was running with me 1 second, and I was just gone the next. I recited the whole conversation and what happened, and he didn't believe me. He insisted I was nowhere to be seen. I work from home, and my wife is a freelance photographer. On this particular day, our daughter was at school. My wife left at 10 a.m. that morning because she had 3 photo shoots to do. She said she would be home by 3:30 after picking up our daughter. So we said our goodbyes, and I continued to work. At 1:30, I heard the garage door open and then close. I assumed it was my wife making a quick stop. Either way, I poked my head out of my office and saw her walking towards our bedroom. I assumed something happened because she was wearing a different outfit. I went back to my desk and finished whatever I was working on, and went to our bedroom. I saw her in the shower. I figured she probably made a mess or was sweating and wanted to refresh herself before her next shoot. I didn't say anything, I just left her alone. She got out of the shower and looked at me, smiled, and I smiled back. I went back to my office and continued working. 15 minutes later, I received a text from my wife with a picture. I asked her where she was and how she got there so fast. She was confused. She said she didn't come home. She didn't stop to take a shower. I went back to the bathroom. The shower was wet. Her towel was wet. There were wet footprints on the bath mat. I made a video and I showed my wife. She couldn't believe it. She was stunned. What the hell just happened?